Hello everyone and welcome to Sinful Gaming. I hope you're all doing well, I hope you're all staying safe, and most of all, I hope you're all fighting that war against the grey. Today we have a start collecting video for you for Age of Sigmar 3rd edition, and today we're going to be looking at the start collecting box for the Gloomspite Gitz. Start collecting boxes are a great way to get into Warhammer Age of Sigmar. They provide a bunch of miniatures, generally at a discounted cost, a varying discount, but they do give you a great place to start with a bunch of cool models to paint up and get your journey started in Warhammer Age of Sigmar. The Gloomspite Gitz box, so let's look at the contents. To start with, we have a Loon Boss in the box set. This is the hero we get with this particular box set, and he's pretty much a goblin warrior hero. So I say warrior lightly, he doesn't really want to be up close fighting all that much. He's more, cowardly, send his minions to do his bidding sort of leader. He's not the one to go up close and personal and fight toe-to-toe with a Stormcast Eternal. He does have a really cool command ability though, which he is allowed to put on grot units around him, which can allow them to do some mortal wounds, which is really nice. And also, heroes are just nice to have from Gloomspite because they do have quite low bravery, so sticking them near some larger blobs to help battle shock immunity in that battle shock phase is really important. Next up, we have a Squig Herd unit. Squigs are an amazing part of the Gloomspite Gitz range. Squigs are literally teeth on legs, and they are probably one of the most unique and interesting things in all of Warhammer in general, I think. Squig Herds are a little decent offensive unit. They pack out a decent amount of hits, but what's really cool is when they flee, they actually do mortal wounds. So not having to spend command points to make them battle shock immune is actually an interesting tactic, as they do mortal wounds as they run wild when they run away. We've then got the 3 large Rockgut Troggoths. These are heavy, elite, monstrous units, and they have some pretty decent damage output. They can also throw boulders at your enemies, crushing them beneath massive tons of rock as they hurl them at and do some mortal wounds with a little bit of range damage, which is nice. All in all, this is a box set that not really is going to give you an army straight at the bat that's going to work too cohesively together. It's rather an interesting look into how Gloomspite Gitz are as an army. This box set gives you 3 of the 4 different paths you can follow in Gloomspite Gitz. And what we're going to aim in this video is we're going to aim to show you how to build up a Gloomspite Gitz army, taking all those parts and bringing them together under one banner. Gloomspite Gitz have a wide variety of models, and I think this mixed arms sort of appeal to Gloomspite is really fun to play. You can of course choose to specialise in different types of Gloomspite Gitz, but this box set really pushes you to be that broad, all-encompassing Gloomspite army, so that's what we're going to focus on in the video. Now, before we get into looking how we can expand upon the box set, I want to talk about the scenery and the endless spells, and we'll start off with the scenery. Gloomspite Gitz are one of many armies in Warhammer Age of Sigmar that have a scenery piece that is part of their allegiance abilities for the army. Like many scenery pieces, it has an updated rule set that is available to download with the FAQs from Games Workshop's website. Though if you're watching this later in the edition and Gloomspite have received a new book, it may not be the case anymore. However, let's talk a little bit about those abilities that it provides. For starters, it can be garrisoned by up to 30 models. This is pretty great, as a lot of Gloomspite units generally are quite large, but this is going to hold maybe your massive units of, say, 60 grots that you can potentially take in some cases. This is going to hold, one of your smaller units of grots, which is nice. You can stick this near a home base objective and just have maybe some shooters in it to do a little bit of range damage while sitting in a terrain piece that keeps them nice and safe. It also has a really cool ability that it makes units within 12 inch of it immune to battle shock. This is really great. Battle shock is one of those things that's become really apparent in the new Age of Sigmar edition, and the ability to be immune to it is really great. Once again, setting this up near enough to an objective to get units on your home objectives immune to battle shock is massive within the game. The coolest thing though that it does is it allows you to bring back destroyed units at half strength. However, those units can vary depending on who your general is. If you've got a grot general, you can bring back some grots, and you can always bring back grots. However, if you've got like a Spider Fang general, you can bring back Spider Riders. Troggoth general, you can bring back your Troggoth units with a wounds characteristic of 5 or less. And if you've got one of the varying Squig leaders as well, you can bring back units of Squigs. So there's a bunch of different ways you can play around with this terrain piece and get some interesting ways to get some extra models on the table after your units have already been destroyed, representing that unending tide of Gloomspite army models. And onto the endless spells. The Gloomspite Gitz is an interesting army in that it has actually 4 endless spells rather than the normal 3 we see in most box sets for army specific endless spells. The Gloomspite Gitz have 4 endless spells as mentioned, and the first one we have is the Malevolent Moon. This is, of course, as you can see, the moon shaped endless spell you see there. It's a predatory endless spell. This means it moves around the battlefield controlled by one of your wizards or potentially running wild if there's no one controlling it, and it does some mortal wounds and also hampers your opponent's wizards, so long as they're not Gloomspite. This is worth mentioning a couple of times as well. You'll notice a lot of these endless spells and a lot of endless spells in general that are army specific don't actually affect them, so when they run wild they're not quite as deadly as they could be. It will do the mortal wounds to you, but it won't hamper your wizards. You've then got Mork's Mighty Mushrooms, which is the giant mushroom cloud you see there. It's a non-predatory endless spell. It doesn't move, however, it does have a random range as well. It flies out 66 from your wizard that casts it, and then it starts exploding. It does a bunch of mortal wounds based on the unit size of the units near it. So say there's a unit of 20 models within range of it, it rolls 20 dice, and on 5-ups it does some mortal wounds, and it does this to all units in range of it. It's an absolutely devastating spell to horde armies. So watch out, Gloomspite Gitz. This one is definitely one you might want to use against your rivals. Scrap Scuttle's Arachna Cauldron is next. This is the cauldron on the spider legs. A pretty cool looking endless spell if I do say so myself. Linked Endless Spell, which is an interesting thing in that it sort of tags along next to the wizard who summons it, and it allows the wizard who's it's linked to reroll all his sort of magical rolls. This is Dispel, Unbinds, and Casts. It also gives the wizard access to the full lore of the Moon Clan, which is really cool. This means you're no longer having to worry about picking which spell you want. You can be a little bit more free in how you play, and you've got a ton more options when you have this endless spell on the battlefield. It also does a nice little tiny bit of splash damage of mortal wounds near any units that get close enough to the wizard, as it sort of protects its master. Lastly, we have the Scuttle Tide, another predatory endless spell, one that moves around the battlefield and attacks your opponent. This one does actually hamper a lot of Gloomspite units and will do the mortal wounds to them unless they are Spiderfang, because spiders don't hunt Spiderfang. This particular endless spell pops out of terrain, which is pretty cool. So it means it has a great deal of range across the tabletop. And it does mortal wounds, which is really cool. And so now that we've looked at all of this, what I want to go and do next is we're going to look at some units and different parts of the army we can add to that original box set we've got, along with this terrain piece and endless spells, to see how we can build up our Gloomspite Gitz army. And so, where can we look to next for some different options for our Gloomspite Gitz army? For starters, I want to talk about shooters and stabbers. These are the mainstay of Gloomspite Gitz army, and definitely something you want to consider investing in to add onto your initial Star Collecting Box purchase. As I mentioned, the Loon Boss inside the Star Collecting Box has a command ability that targets these particular units and allows them to do some mortal wounds. Both shooters and stabbers can make some great use of this in combat, but both of them have some varying different abilities they can do to sort of play around with this. I do think shooters are a cool unit to play. They're a little bit cheaper than the stabber variation, and while they don't get as many mortal wounds in combat because they're not quite as deadly, it does give them combat potential where they otherwise might not have it. The ability to take the ranged variation as well allows you to deploy them inside your Loon Shrine and keep them nice and safe, and then charge out and do a few mortal wounds when your opponent has been peppered and damaged a little bit. Now, to help around some of these deployment stuff that maybe your Gloomspite Gitz might struggle with, and the fact that they don't generally pop out all that many mortal wounds in varying sort of range capacity, you do have Grot Wizards. What Gloomspite lack in maybe, I guess, good wizards, they have really cheap wizards. You can get a cool one-turn double caster like the Fungoid Cave Shaman for 95 points, or you can get other cheaper variations like the Web Spinner Shaman or the Madcap Shaman for 80 and 85 points. So some really nice cheap casters there. You do have Scragrot the Loon King, a named character caster for the Gloomspite Gitz, and in fact their overall king. And he's a really good caster in his own right, though his points do reflect that. Grot Wizards are cool. You've got a really fun spell lore that has things like a spell that can make your opponent strike last. You've got a redeployment teleport spell, and you've got some other cool damage dealing ones in there as well. A nice varying spell lore for the Grots. We've then got the Spider Fang, which is the main part of the army that's not represented inside the Star Collecting box, and I think it's a really fun part of the army to have. This is something really different, and the Grotzins that ride the spiders are a little bit more feral than all their other Grot companions. That's to say, maybe the Grots from the Moon Clan and the Squig Riders and all that. Civilized isn't probably quite what I describe them as, but whatever it is, these Spider Riders are a little bit more savage than them. Spiders do mortal wounds naturally. They have spider bites, so as you imagine, poisonous attacks do mortal wounds. This is really cool. You've got Spider Riders, and then you've got gigantic Arachnarok spiders as well, which are these giant behemoths you see pictured here. I do think both units have a great place to be in the army. And lastly, while we're all talking about Arachnarok spiders, let's talk about Squigs, because both of them have access to the two monsters in the army, the Arachnarok spider, and then we've got the Mangler Squig, a giant squig, and in fact two giant squigs chained together that sort of just rampage across the battlefield. This is an absolute wrecking ball of a model and a ton of fun to paint and build. It just looks amazing. Now, you'll notice we've got the Squig herd in the box set, and we've got the Mangler Squig, which is this giant squig, and there are in fact mid-sized squigs as well. The Squig Hoppers and Boingrot Bounders, which are mid-sized squigs, and they are a cavalry unit as well. Squig Riders are the much cheaper option, though do come in larger units, and you've also got Boingrot Bounders who come in, while smaller units will cost you more over time because of their combat potential. You can get 10 Boingrot Bounders for 200 points, just over in fact, while you get Squig Hoppers, 10 of them, for a little bit cheaper without having to use a reinforcement point as well. With all of this talked about though, let's go look at a little sample army list we put together, and we can discuss what we're doing with the army list there to give you an idea of where you can go with everything we've said in the video. Alright, and so here we have a little sample army list we put together for Gloomspite Gitz. First of all, this is 750 points. So a little bit about that, you only get access to 2 heroes maximum, you're only required to take 1 battle line unit, and you've only got 1 behemoth, 1 unit can be reinforced, and you can only take 1 piece of artillery. Other than that though, it is free reign. So Gloomspite Gitz, we've got our leaders, and we're going to have our Loon Boss be our general in the army. He's going to take the command trait Dead Shouty. Now, what's cool about this is it allows him to use once per game his command ability on his War Scroll for free. Now, I know what you're saying, you get more command points this edition, but what I've found playing quite a few games now of the brand new edition is that you actually run out of command points because you've got more things to spend them on. So being able to use a command ability for free is really fun and really useful. This can be that time when you're going to need to get those little bits of mortal wounds out of a unit like your shooters in combat that they might not otherwise achieve, and you maybe don't have the command points to spare for it. We're then going to have a Madcap Shaman. Mainly, we've gone with this Shaman because it's the only one that fits inside the points, but the model is really cool. The artifact we've gone for on the Madcap Shaman is the Moonface Mommet. This targets a unit within 12 inch of the Shaman and makes them -1 to their armor. This is really cool because minusing armor is one of the main things in the game, and one of the only things in the game that actually can be stacked. So this compiles with Rend. We've then got spell Hand of Gork, and we're going to look at this a little bit later in what we've taken elsewhere, but Hand of Gork is the generic spell we want because movement is key. This is going to allow us to put our units where we want on the table if we can get the cast off. For battle line, we've got 20 shooters. Shooters are in here because they're that slightly cheaper points value than stabbers, but like I said again, you can stick this unit on your home objective in that Loon Shrine, keep them nice and protected, battle shock immune, and then when you need to, move them out and potentially go do some mortal wounds with the Loon Boss near them. We've got our 12 Squig herd here as well. This is going to be a much more offensive and aggressive unit. One we can use up in trades throughout the game. And what I mean by trades is giving up this unit to do the mortal wound damage to hopefully make them run. We've then got in other units 3 Rockgut Troggoths, and this is going to be a big hammer for us. A hammer is a unit we do to deal maximum damage. So with the Rockgut Troggoths, they're going to go try and hit the hardest thing in our opponent's army and get rid of it. 5 Spider Riders I find complete sort of our quad units that we are required to have, or at least I think we want to have in this sort of style of army where we're trying to bring all the Gloomspite Gitz together. 5 Spider Riders is going to give us some mortal wound output in combat itself, and they're also going to give us a really fast unit. Spider Riders have this really cool ability where when they move, they count as if they had fly, so they can scale vertical terrain like it's nothing. This is really, really useful. It allows them to get around the battlefield nice and quickly with their decent movement as well. For endless spells, we've gone with Scrap Scuttle's Arachnid Cauldron. This fills out our last 50 points, which brings us up to a perfect 750 points. And the reason we've gone for this one is it allows our Madcap Shaman just to have a whole ton of versatility if he can get this off. Generally, your first turn, you're not going to be wanting to use Hand to Gork to sacrifice any of your units, flinging them out alone, so you're probably going to cast the Scrap Scuttle's Arachnid Cauldron right out of the gate and keep it in your wizard, giving him access to more spells in later turns, setting up so you can counter what your opponent's doing with a bunch more variety of spells. This army here all goes into a single battalion, which is the Battle Regiment. This means our whole force here will be a single drop, which is really cool. At 750 points, it's not hard to get a Battle Regiment. It's probably one of the only battalions you're really going to have access to. But I think one drop allows our Gloomspite Gitz to set up where we want to and dictate who gets first or second turn based on what we need in the game. The last thing we have to pick before a game is our grand strategy in Triumph, and as said, this is 750 points perfect, this army, so we're not going to get a Triumph, so I've not talked about it here at all, but our grand strategy, we're going to go with Predator's Domain. Predator's Domain is a grand strategy. When the battle ends, you complete this grand strategy if you control more terrain features than your opponent. Now, the controlling of terrain features is a little bit different. It's within 3, not 6 of them. However, we've got access to the Hand of Gork, and a lot of our units don't want to be fighting all that much anyway. So, at the end of the game, you pretty much run all your stuff off onto objectives or onto terrain and just control more than your opponent at the end of the game. Especially if you've got that last turn of the game, you can almost guarantee you're going to get this grand strategy. But I hope this video has been useful to you all. I hope this has shown a little bit of what you can do with Gloomspite Gitz in the new 3rd edition of Warhammer Age of Sigmar. Love to hear back from you all on what you're planning to do with some Gloomspite Gitz if you're just getting into the army. Well, thank you all for watching the video. We hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you have not already. Also, while you're at it, why not come chat more with us on Discord? We've got a link in the description of the video below to our Discord server. You can come chat with me and other members of our fine little community here at Sinful Gaming. Lastly, we'd like to give a shout out to everyone who helps support the channel in various different ways. First of all, to our Patreon members, Christian Weir, James Soren, Chaos Spawn, AJC, Kenny Lowe, Outer and Shot First, James Crowder, Andrew Bowen, Nathan Fee, Tim Newman, The Rising Ape, Cure Dynamic, Agu, Anthony B, MJ, and Dyna226. Thank you to, as well, our YouTube members, Green Roots Gaming, Fire Titan, Steve T, The Real Zeot, Chris Wallace, Turiot12, Vinny, and Loch Lorick. And a special thanks to our artist who does all the channel art for us, Lady Witchfox Art, thank you very much. And to our Discord moderator, Xmorphic, you do a fantastic job on Discord for us as well. Thank you all, everyone, for watching. If you'd like to help support on Patreon or YouTube member or help support the channel in another way, you can do so by following one of the links in the description of the video to Patreon or YouTube members, or go buy some Sinful Gaming merch from our Teespring store, also linked in the video's description. That's it for today, everyone. Thank you again. Stay safe, stay well, and most of all, keep fighting that war against the Grey. Ciao for now.